You spend your whole life believing that love from your child is unconditional, that no matter what happens, you'll always be their safe place. But I learned the hard way that even the people you raise can turn into strangers when greed walks through the door. My name's Michael, and if you'd told me a few years ago that my own daughter, the same little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest after bedtime stories, would one day try to erase me from my own home, I'd have laughed in your face. Back then, life was simple. My wife had passed a few years earlier, and it was just me and Lily. I devoted everything to her. College, a car, even helped her get a head start on a real estate career. I was proud, maybe too proud. She was smart, confident, charming, the kind of woman who could convince anyone of anything. I didn't realize that included me. It started small, her telling me I should relax and let her handle the bills, then pushing me to trust her with the paperwork. I thought it was sweet, her wanting to take care of her old man. But somewhere along the way, that care turned into control. I remember the first time I noticed something off. It was the day she snapped at me for asking about the mortgage. "Dad, you don't have to worry about that stuff anymore," she said, rolling her eyes like I was some senile fool. That hurt more than I let on. But I brushed it off. You always do when it's your kid. A few weeks later, I got a letter from the bank addressed to her, not me. When I asked about it, she snatched it from my hands and said it was nothing important. I wanted to believe her, but something in her tone, cold, sharp, chilled me. That night, as I sat alone in the living room, staring at the empty space where my wife's photo used to hang, a thought hit me that I couldn't shake. My daughter wasn't taking care of me anymore. She was taking over. The next few weeks were strange, like I was living in my own house but walking on eggshells. Lily stopped talking to me the way she used to. No more, "Hey, Dad," or "How was your day?" Just quick nods, half smiles, and the occasional sigh when I asked too many questions. She was always on her phone or laptop, whispering into the receiver and minimizing screens when I walked by. I told myself it was work. Real estate's cutthroat, right? But something about the way she guarded that computer felt wrong. One morning I woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. It was Lily and a man I didn't recognize. I peeked around the corner and saw them standing close, too close, going over some papers spread across the kitchen table. The man looked polished. Designer suit, slick hair. That fake confidence that screams trouble. I caught snippets of their conversation. Words like transfer, closing, and title. My gut tightened. I stepped out and cleared my throat. "Morning," I said, forcing a smile. The guy froze. Lily turned around, her expression flashing from surprise to irritation. "Dad, this is, Mr. Collins. He's helping me with some property stuff." Collins gave me a handshake that felt rehearsed. "Pleasure to meet you, sir." I nodded but didn't buy it. The second he left, I asked her straight out what was going on. "Just business, Dad," she said, brushing past me. "You don't need to worry about things you don't understand." That line cut deep. Things I don't understand. I'd spent my whole life working my hands raw to give her everything. I wasn't stupid. Something was happening behind my back, and it smelled like money. That night, I went through the drawer where I kept all my important documents. Mortgage, insurance, the deed to the house, and my stomach dropped. Half of them were gone. I confronted Lily right then, but she didn't even flinch. "You said you trusted me," she said flatly. "Well, this is me taking responsibility." I couldn't even find words. The little girl who once held my hand crossing the street was looking at me like a stranger she'd outgrown. That's when I realized I hadn't lost her love overnight. She'd been planning this for months, and whatever she was doing, I was already too late to stop it. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the spot where my documents used to be. trying to figure out when exactly my daughter became someone I didn't recognize. Around 3 a.m., I made myself a pot of coffee and decided that if she wanted to play games, I'd play too. The next morning, I waited until she left for work, then went straight to her office. The place was empty except for a few agents tapping away at their keyboards. I walked into her cubicle like I owned the place, because in a way, I did. Everything she had, every bit of success she was chasing, was built on what I gave her. On her desk, I found a folder labeled Pending Sale. I opened it, and my heart almost stopped. There it was, our home, my name listed under seller, but not a single signature in my handwriting. The buyer? Some holding company I'd never heard of. I felt sick. My own daughter was selling my house without even telling me. I took photos of the paperwork and slipped out before anyone could see me. On the drive home, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep the wheels straight. I didn't want to believe it, but denial had left the building. That night when she got home, she was all smiles, acting like everything was normal. "Hey, Dad, you eat yet?" she asked, tossing her purse on the counter. I wanted to confront her right there. But something in me said, wait. I needed proof that couldn't be twisted, something that would show the world what she was doing. So I started recording every conversation, every text. I even set up a small camera in the living room, tucked behind a picture frame. For days I watched her, and every night she whispered into her phone about deadlines and signatures and making it official. One evening, I overheard her say something that made my blood run cold. "He'll be out by next month," she said softly. "He doesn't even know it's happening." I remember gripping the armrest so hard my knuckles turned white. "He'll be out by next month." That he was me. My own daughter wasn't just selling the house, she was planning to throw me out of it. I woke up the next morning with a pit in my stomach and a plan forming in my head. I wasn't going to sit around waiting to be thrown out of my own damn home. I needed to know who was pulling the strings behind my daughter, because as much as it hurt to admit it, Lily wasn't smart enough to pull off something this big on her own. When she left for work, I tailed her, not close enough to be seen, just enough to keep her in sight. She drove downtown, parked by a coffee shop, and met a man in a grey suit. I couldn't see his face clearly, but something about him screamed money. They sat at a corner table, talking low, heads close together. I watched from across the street, hidden behind a newspaper like some washed-up detective. After about 20 minutes, she laughed at something he said, leaned in and touched his arm. My stomach twisted. The man handed her a folder. She tucked it into her bag, and they parted ways. I followed him instead. He got into a black BMW, no plates on the front, and headed toward the business district. I took a photo of his license plate and sent it to a buddy of mine who still worked in private security. "Run this," I texted. An hour later, he called me back. "You sitting down?" he asked. "The car's registered to a company named Greystone Holdings. And guess who's the listed owner?" My pulse quickened. "Who?" "A guy named Alan Brooks." The name hit me like a brick. Alan was my late wife's old business partner, the same man who'd shown up at her funeral years ago, pretending to care while secretly blaming me for not saving her when she got sick. I hadn't seen him since. And now he was back, sitting across from my daughter like some kind of puppet master. That night, I confronted Lily. I didn't tell her what I knew, just threw out the name to see her reaction. Her eyes widened for a split second before she forced a laugh. "Alan, why would you bring him up?" she said too quickly. That told me everything. She was lying. "Don't play dumb, Lily," I said quietly. "I saw you with him." Her face went pale. "Dad, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "He said you ruined Mom's life." My chest went tight. "And you believed him." She didn't answer. That silence told me she already had. I couldn't shake those words. "He said you ruined Mom's life." They echoed in my head like a curse. That night I poured myself a drink, sat at the kitchen table and stared at the framed photo of my late wife, Karen. She'd been gone almost 10 years, but in that moment it felt fresh again, like she'd just left the room. Karen and I had our problems, sure. The cancer, the bills, the stress, it wore us down. But I loved her. I did everything I could. So why would Alan tell Lily something like that? What did he stand to gain by dragging up ghosts? The next morning, I went through the old storage. Boxes in the attic, the ones I hadn't touched since Karen passed. Inside, I found a stack of documents from her business partnership with Alan. Contracts, bank statements, letters. The deeper I went, the uglier it got. Turns out, Alan had been skimming money from their company for years. When Karen got sick, she confronted him, threatened to go to the police. But she never got the chance. She died 2 months later. I remembered how Alan showed up to the funeral with crocodile tears and a hand on my shoulder, whispering about how much he admired her. Now it all made sense. He was trying to cover his own tracks, even now. But using my daughter to do it, that was something else entirely. I needed proof, so I took those old files to Marcus, a lawyer buddy of mine. He skimmed through the papers, his eyes narrowing. "This guy's smart," he said. "He's been laundering money under shell companies for years, and from what I can see, he's using Lily's name now." My stomach dropped. "What?" He nodded grimly. "Her digital signatures on multiple transfers. She's listed as a business representative." My head spun. Alan wasn't just turning my daughter against me emotionally. He was using her legally. "He's setting her up," Marcus said. "When this blows up, she'll take the fall, not him." I sat there in stunned silence, realizing my daughter wasn't the villain I thought she was. She was just another pawn in Alan's game. But if he thought I was going to sit back and watch him ruin the last piece of my family, he was dead wrong. I left Marcus's office with one thought pounding in my head. Alan started this war, but I was damn sure going to finish it. I knew if I came at Alan head-on, I'd lose. Guys like him don't just lie. They plan their lies years in advance. So I decided to do what he'd never expect. Play dumb. For the next few days, I acted like the same confused, aging dad who couldn't handle a bank statement without his daughter's help. When Lily talked about business stuff, I nodded and smiled, pretending not to understand. I wanted her to think she still had control, because the moment she suspected I knew the truth, everything would blow up. Meanwhile, Marcus and I started building a case. Quietly, we traced Alan's shell companies, found 3 accounts tied to fraudulent property deals, and linked them straight to Greystone Holdings. Every penny stolen had a trail, and I was going to drag that trail right to his front door. Still, the hardest part was facing Lily every day. She'd walk into the kitchen all bright and casual, asking if I'd taken my meds, like I was some fragile old man. I'd force a laugh and play along, but inside, it killed me. She wasn't evil, just blind. Alan had gotten inside her head, twisted every memory, every scar, until she saw me as the villain. One night I caught her on the phone again, whispering in the hallway. "I don't know, Alan," she said, her voice trembling. "He's been quiet lately, too quiet." I heard him reply, muffled through the speaker, "Don't worry. Once the sale closes, we're done. He'll get his notice soon enough." I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. I wanted to burst out and scream at both of them. But instead I picked up my phone and hit record. Every word she said, every lie, I caught it all. The next day, I sent the audio to Marcus, who called me back 10 minutes later his voice almost shaking. "Dan, this isn't just fraud anymore," he said. "This is elder exploitation. If we handle this right, you can bury both of them legally." I looked out the window at Lily sitting on the porch sipping her coffee, completely unaware that her world was about to change. "No," I said softly. "Not both. Just one." Marcus paused. "You're still protecting her?" "She's my daughter," I said. "But Alan's mine." The next few weeks were the calm before the storm, and I made damn sure Alan thought I'd given up. I played the role of the clueless old man to perfection, smiling when Lily talked about paperwork, pretending not to notice the calls she took in hushed tones, acting like I was too busy watching ball games to care. But underneath the calm, I was setting the pieces in motion. Marcus and I worked every angle, quietly gathering the proof Alan thought he'd buried. We found the fake title transfers, the emails, the property deeds, all under names tied to his company. But what sealed it was the discovery of a dummy account in my daughter's name, used to funnel stolen funds. I knew if that came out, Lily would go down with him. So I made my move. One morning, while she was out, I logged into her laptop using a password I knew by heart. Her mother's birthday. Inside her email was everything. Messages from Alan, plans for the sale, even the contract for the transfer of ownership. I forwarded them all to Marcus, then deleted every trace of what I'd done. That night, I looked at Lily across the dinner table, her eyes bright with excitement as she talked about a new opportunity. I smiled and nodded, knowing exactly what that opportunity was, selling me out for a paycheck she didn't even understand. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart," I said softly, and for a second, guilt flickered across her face. It was quick, but I saw it. The next day, Marcus called. "It's done," he said. "We've got enough to file charges, but we can't just hand this to the cops yet. Not if you want. Alan exposed publicly. I told him to wait. I wanted to see Alan's face when his empire crumbled. So we staged it. Marcus arranged a fake closing meeting with a buyer interested in the property. Alan and Lily would both be there, thinking it was their big payday. What they didn't know was that the buyer was working for me. And every word, every signature, every smug laugh was going to be recorded. When the day came, I stood in the parking lot across from the building, watching through the glass as Alan shook hands with Lily and slid the documents across the table. My phone buzzed. Marcus's voice came through, low and tense. "You ready?" I watched Alan sign his name with that same arrogant grin and whispered back, "Let's end this." Watching them from across that glass wall was like staring through time. My daughter, the kid who used to beg me for ice cream after school, was sitting across from the man who ruined her mother's life, smiling like they'd just closed a dream deal. Alan leaned back in his chair, cool as ever, his hand resting on the stack of papers he thought would make him rich again. I clenched my fists, but I kept my distance. This wasn't about rage anymore. It was about justice. Marcus's guy, posing as the buyer, played his part perfectly. "So this transfer gives you full ownership, right?" he asked, sliding the papers back toward them. Alan nodded confidently. "Correct. The current owner, Mr. Daniels, has agreed to the terms." I almost laughed. "Agreed? The nerve of that man!" The fake buyer tapped his pen against the table. "Mind if we go over the numbers once more?" Alan shrugged, impatient. "Sure, but make it quick." As they reviewed the documents, Marcus and I listened in real time through a hidden mic. Alan bragged openly, saying things like, "Once this closes, the old man's out for good." I recorded every word. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The buyer looked up and said, "So you're confirming these are all legitimate signatures?" Alan smirked. "Of course. You think I'd risk my reputation on forgeries?" The buyer smiled slightly, then leaned back. "Good, because this entire conversation's being recorded, and that's going to make the police report a lot more. Interesting. Alan froze, his smile vanishing. What the hell are you talking about? The buyer nodded toward the door just as Marcus and 2 uniformed officers walked in. Lily's face went pale. Alan jumped to his feet, blustering, "This is a setup!" Marcus didn't even flinch. "You're damn right it is." I stepped inside then, watching Alan's face twist when he saw me. "You?" he hissed. "You think you can outsmart me?" I stared him down. "No, Alan, I didn't outsmart you. You outsmarted yourself." The officers cuffed him while he shouted about lawyers and power, and how none of it would stick. But when they read him the list of charges, fraud, forgery, elder exploitation, his confidence cracked. Lily sat there trembling, tears spilling down her face. "Dad, what did you do?" she whispered. I looked at her, my heart breaking all over again. "What I had to," I said quietly. After they hauled Alan out in cuffs, the room felt heavier than air. Lily just sat there, her eyes red, her hands shaking as if the floor had dropped out from under her. The cops and Marcus were talking paperwork, evidence, legal follow-up. None of it mattered. All I saw was my daughter, broken in a way I didn't know how to fix. "You set me up," she whispered, her voice barely there. "No, sweetheart," I said quietly. "I saved you." She laughed, bitter and hollow. "Saved me? You humiliated me in front of everyone. You made me look like an idiot." I wanted to tell her the truth, that Alan had been setting her up, using her name, that she was days away from taking the fall for everything. But she wasn't ready to hear it. Her pride was still louder than her pain. "He told me you ruined Mom," she said suddenly, eyes filling again. "That you let her die because you wouldn't pay for her treatment." That one hit deep. "Lily," I said, steadying my voice, "your mom refused that treatment. She didn't want to spend her last months hooked up to machines." Alan twisted that story to turn you against me. I could see the war in her eyes, the doubt, the guilt, the confusion. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she said. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "You don't have to believe me now," I said softly. "Just look at the evidence when it comes out. The truth has a way of speaking for itself." She stood up, her chair scraping the floor, and walked toward the door without saying another word. Watching her leave was worse than anything Alan ever did, because I realized something. Winning didn't feel like victory when it cost you your own child. The next few days were quiet. Alan was all over the news, his empire collapsing, his name dragged through the mud. Marcus said the case was airtight, but none of it made me feel better. My phone stayed silent, no calls from Lily, no texts, just silence and the hum of the empty house. Then one evening, I found an envelope on my porch, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of the house deed, with my name listed again as the sole owner. At the bottom, written in her handwriting, were 3 words that made my chest tighten. "I'm sorry, Dad. I must have read that note 100 times, tracing her handwriting like it was the first kind word she'd given me in years. "I'm sorry, Dad." Simple, but heavy enough to crush me. For a few days, I just carried it in my pocket, pulling it out whenever the house felt too quiet, which was often. Marcus called to update me about the case, but I barely heard a word. All I cared about was whether Lily was okay. I didn't care about Alan's trial, or the money, or even the damn house anymore. None of that meant a thing if I'd lost my daughter for good. A week later, I decided to reach out. I drove to her apartment, rehearsing what I'd say the whole way. Something between "I forgive you" and "I miss you." When I knocked, she opened the door slowly, eyes swollen from crying. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly. She hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. The place was a mess, boxes half-packed, papers everywhere. "You moving?" I asked. She nodded. "I quit my job. Can't stay here after everything that happened." Voice cracked on the last word. I sat down on the couch and sighed. Lily, you were used. Alan manipulated you. I don't blame you for what happened. She looked at me, guilt written all over her face. You should, she whispered. I chose to believe him. I wanted someone to blame after Mum died, and you were the easiest target. I swallowed hard. Grief makes fools out of all of us. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she asked, Can you ever forgive me? I smiled faintly. Already did, kiddo. She broke down then, sobbing into my shoulder like she used to when she was little. For the first time in years, I felt her arms around me, not out of duty, but love. When I left that night, she promised to come by the next day so we could start fresh. But she never showed. The next morning, Marcus called. Dan, he said slowly, you might want to sit down. My stomach dropped. What happened? He hesitated. Alan made bail last night. I felt the air leave my lungs. And he's gone, Dan. Disappeared. No trace. I looked out the window, gripping that apology note so tight it nearly tore. Just when I thought it was over, the nightmare was back. When Marcus told me Alan had vanished, I thought maybe he'd just run off, skip town, hide somewhere warm, wait it out. But deep down, I knew men like him didn't disappear. They lingered like poison in the blood. For the next few nights, I barely slept. Every creak in the house, every flicker of headlights outside the window set my nerves on edge. I started keeping a baseball bat by the door, like some cliché old man waiting for a ghost that wouldn't quit. Then one night, around 2 a.m., the motion light out front clicked on. I grabbed the bat and peered through the blinds, and there he was, Alan Brooks, standing in my driveway, smiling like the devil himself. My blood ran cold. He looked thinner, meaner, like prison had stripped away whatever fake charm he used to wear. I opened the door but didn't step out. You've got a lot of nerve showing up here, I said. He chuckled. Relax, Dan, I just came to talk. Talk? I barked. You framed me, used my daughter. Tried to steal my home. What's left to talk about? He took a slow step forward, his hands raised. We both made mistakes. I was just playing the game. You won this round, but let's not pretend you're some saint. You ruined Karen, and you turned Lily against her own. Blood. Hearing her name come from. His mouth made my vision blur with anger. You don't get to say her name, I growled. He smirked. Still touchy, huh? Guess that guilt never really went away. I wanted to swing that bat so bad my hands shook, but I didn't. He wanted me to lose control, to give him something he could use. You need to leave, I said, my voice low. Right now. He grinned wider, that same reptile smile I remembered from the funeral. Oh, I'm not going anywhere. Dan, you think you can destroy me and just walk away? Nah, I've still got cards left to play. He turned and walked toward the street, but before he got in his car, he glanced back. Tell Lily I said hi, he called out. My chest tightened. He knew where she was. The moment his taillights vanished into the night, I picked up my phone and dialed her number. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. That's when it hit me. Alan wasn't running. He was hunting.
The second I realized Alan knew where Lily was, every thought in my head turned into noise. I grabbed my keys and tore out of the driveway like a man possessed, the bat still sitting in the passenger seat. Her apartment was 20 minutes away, but that drive felt like hours. My mind was running wild. What if he'd already been there? What if she didn't even know he was out? When I pulled into her complex, her lights were still on. Relief washed over me for a second until I saw her front door cracked open. I jumped out of the car and sprinted upstairs, my heart pounding in my ears. "Lily!" I shouted, shoving the door open. The living room was a wreck, drawers yanked out, papers scattered everywhere. No sign of her. My stomach dropped. Then I heard it, a faint sound from the kitchen. I crept forward, gripping the bat tighter. "Lily?" I whispered. A figure stepped out from behind the counter, and my breath caught. It was her eyes wide, trembling. "Dad!" she gasped. "He was here!" She pointed toward the back window, where the glass was shattered inward, he said. He said this wasn't over. My chest tightened as I looked around, scanning for any sign of him. Nothing but chaos. I called Marcus, told him what happened, and within minutes 2 patrol cars showed up. They searched the area, but Alan was gone again. The cops said they'd put out an alert, but I could tell from their faces they didn't expect to find him any time soon. I stayed with Lily that night, sitting by the door while she slept on the couch, jumping at every sound outside. Sometime before dawn, I must have dozed off. When I woke up, she was gone. Panic shot through me until I saw a note on the counter. "Asterisk, don't worry. Dad, I'm ending this. I'll call you when it's over. Asterisk, I felt the blood drain from my face. Ending this? What did she mean by that? I called her a dozen times, no answer. I drove to every place she might have gone. Her office, the coffee shop, even the cemetery where her mum was buried. Nothing. By evening, I was running on fumes and fear. Then my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. It was a photo. Lily standing in a dimly lit room, her hands tied, eyes terrified. And behind her, grinning like he'd just won the game, was Alan Brooks. The moment I saw that photo, something inside me snapped. Fear, rage, guilt, all of it boiled together into something I can't even name. I sent the picture to Marcus and called him, but he told me to stay put, to let the cops handle it. "We'll track his phone, Dan. Just don't do anything stupid," he said. But waiting wasn't an option. Not when my little girl was tied up somewhere with that monster. I studied the photo again, zooming in on the background. There was a faint reflection in a mirror, an old neon sign that said, "Auto and Tire." I knew that place. It was an abandoned repair shop on the outskirts of town. Alan had used it years ago when he and Karen ran their business. I didn't think twice. I grabbed the bat, jumped in my truck, and floored it. The night was thick with fog, the kind that makes the world feel smaller, quieter, deadlier. When I pulled up to the old shop, the place looked deserted, windows boarded, weeds swallowing the lot. But there was a light flickering from inside. My pulse hammered in my throat. I stepped out, every creak of gravel under my boots sounding like thunder. I pushed the door open slowly, the metal groaning. "Alan!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. "Let her go!" No answer, just silence, and the faint hum of a light bulb swinging overhead. I moved deeper inside, my grip on the bat tightening with every step. Then I heard it, a soft whimper. "Lily?" I called. "Dad!" Her voice cracked. I followed the sound to a small office in the back. She was there, tied to a chair, eyes wide with terror. I ran to her, started untying the ropes. "It's okay, baby. I've got you." But before I could finish, I heard a slow clap behind me. "Touching," Alan said, stepping out of the shadows. He had a gun in his hand and that same smug grin on his face. "You really think you can just stroll in here and play the hero?" I stood up slowly, putting myself between him and Lily. "You don't have to do this," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Don't tell me what I have to do." He snapped. "You ruined everything. My business, my life, my name. Now I'm taking yours." He raised the gun. Time seemed to freeze. I could hear Lily sobbing behind me, whispering, "Please, Dad, don't." But I didn't move. I just looked him dead in the eye and said, "You already lost, Alan. You just don't know it yet." For a moment, the world stood still. Just me, Alan, and the weight of every bad choice either of us had ever made hanging in the air. His hand shook, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he spat. "You're just an old man who couldn't protect his wife or his daughter." I took a step forward. "You're right," I said quietly. "I failed Karen, I failed Lily, but the difference between you and me, Alan, is that I can live with my mistakes. You just keep making more." His jaw tightened, and the gun wavered slightly. "Shut up," he barked. "I didn't. Darren was going to turn you in, wasn't she? That's why you came after her. You didn't just rob her business, you robbed her of peace. And then you used my daughter to finish what you started." His face twisted with rage, veins bulging in his neck. "You think you know everything?" he snarled. "Karen wasn't some saint. She was stealing from me." "No," I said, stepping closer. "She was saving evidence because she finally saw what you really were. That broke him." He screamed and pulled the trigger. The sound shattered the air. Lily screamed as I stumbled backward, bracing for pain, but nothing. I looked down. He'd missed, the bullet buried in the wall behind me. Before he could fire again, I swung the bat, hitting his wrist hard enough to send the gun flying. He lunged at me, and we crashed to the floor, fighting like animals. Years of anger poured out of both of us, every punch, every curse, every ghost of what we'd lost. He clawed at my face, tried to grab the gun, but I slammed my elbow into his ribs, grabbed the bat again and raised it. "Dad, stop!" Lily cried. For a second, I hesitated. Alan looked up at me, smirking through the blood on his lip. "Do it," he hissed. "Be the killer you always were." I froze. Every instinct screamed to finish it, to end him once and for all, but then I saw Lily's face. The fear, the pleading. I dropped the bat, breathing hard. "No," I said. "You don't get to turn me into you," sirens wailed in the distance. Marcus had traced my call. Alan looked around, realizing it was over. He lunged for the gun again, but before he could reach it, Lily grabbed it first, her hands shaking. "Don't," I whispered. But Alan just laughed. "Like mother, like daughter," he said. "Always weak." And that's when the shot rang out, only this time it wasn't his finger on the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse like thunder. And for a few endless seconds no one moved. Alan stumbled backward, eyes wide, blood blooming across his shirt. He looked down at his chest, then at Lily, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "You," he started, but the words died in his throat. He fell to his knees, gasping, and then hit the floor with a dull thud. Lily dropped the gun and collapsed, sobbing. I ran to her, pulling her close, both of us shaking. The sirens grew louder, flashing lights painting the walls red and blue. I didn't even notice Marcus running in until he was right beside us. The cops swarmed the place, shouting, checking Alan's pulse, cuffing his lifeless wrist out of instinct. I just held Lily, whispering, "It's over, sweetheart. It's finally over." But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the end of something, bigger than revenge, like closing a door that should have never been opened. They questioned us for hours, but eventually the truth came out. The recording, the threats, the kidnapping, it's all lined up. They ruled it self-defense. No charges. Alan Brooks was gone for good, and with him, the shadow that had haunted our family for a decade. In the weeks that followed, Lily moved back in with me. At first, the silence between us was heavy, full of everything we couldn't say. But slowly, little by little, things started to heal. We cooked together, fixed up the garden, even laughed sometimes, real laughs, not the kind that hide pain. One night, we sat on the porch watching the sunset, and she said, "Mum would have hated how far this went." I nodded. "Yeah, but she'd be proud of how you ended it. She leaned, her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like home again. People say revenge gives you closure, but they're wrong. What gives you peace isn't payback, it's forgiveness. Forgiving them, forgiving yourself, and finding the strength to start over. I still talk to Karen sometimes, out there under that same sky, telling her about Lily, about the garden, about how we're doing okay now. And I like to think wherever she is, she's smiling, because after everything we lost, we finally found our way back to being a family again.